Greetings, my dear Moonshiners. We continue our journey into the world of the MoonShine admin panel. Before this, we've already covered the first steps, installation and configuration. We're not rushing but gradually understanding everything to become professional Moonshiners. On our journey, we'll dive into the entire concept and understand what's happening under the hood. And you'll have far fewer questions compared to the previous guides for version 2. At least, that's how it seems to me. Next, we'll focus on the appearance. We've already installed MoonShine, done the configuration, and observed certain menu items, but we didn't create these sections ourselves. It might seem like it's time to create a resource, fill it with fields, and enjoy how our CRUD works. But friends, trust me. For a long time, I've been observing questions in the chat. Even people who've been using MoonShine for over a year still face issues with the menu. They're tied to the idea that the foundation is resources, the foundation is pages. You add them, everything somehow works, somehow gets added to the menu, but how to work with the menu outside of resources and pages, and so on. And that's exactly what we'll start with now, the menu. I like this top-down approach, because when you're developing an admin panel, you'll still start with the appearance first, and only later move on to resources. Okay, friends, the menu. Where to start? Definitely with the documentation. Go through it, even though you're watching this guide. Still open the documentation and skim through it again. Open the template, play around on your own, and further understand everything happening at the menu level. Now, let's move to MoonShine. In the layout directory, MoonShine layout PHP. And it's here that we'll declare menu items. As I think you've already noticed, for this, we need the menu method, which returns an array and takes something from the parent app layout. If we dive inside, we'll see that by default, we already have a menu group with MoonShine users and roles. You can take them out of here and implement them your way, or start from scratch, or even remove them and not use these menu items, but do something of your own. We'll leave them as they are, but later we'll add another menu item. Let's do that. For this, we need to use the menu item class. As you can see, the namespace is MenuManager. Okay, we create an instance using the make method. And then what do we need? We have label. This is what the menu item will be called. Filler. This is what fills the menu and gives it its link. Why is it called filler and not just URL? Because it can be just a string like home. But you can also pass a class string of a specific resource here. For example, as we already have MoonShine user resource class. And MoonShine will automatically create an instance of this resource and get its URL. And the resource URL is generated based on pages. The first page, we'll get to that when we study resources. But here, you need to understand that the menu link can be anything. There are quick fillers like a resource or a page. But it can also be a string in any URL, even an external one. Let's make getMoonshine.app and call the link documentation. Okay, let's go back to the admin panel, refresh the page, and we'll see that we have a link to documentation. When clicked, we'll immediately go to the documentation. Let's say, for behavior with an external link, this isn't very good logic, we need to change the target. For this, we'll use the blank method. Okay. Also, friends, within this lesson, we can look at the icon method, which will allow us to specify a specific icon right away. Let's do that. Here, it suggests icon, document. I think that will work for us. Let's go back, refresh the page, and we'll see that the icon has also appeared. Let's go back to the documentation and see what else is interesting. Right at the top, we also see groups. So, we can group menu items, as it looks in the group that's already present. Let's play with that too. We'll start small and group our documentation. For this, we need menu group, also make, the group name, let's just call it group. And then in the array, all the elements in this group. If we dive in, we'll see that we already have a group, inside it documentation, and for group, we can also specify certain icons. Let's do that. Icon, and let's make it document check in our case, so it stands out. Refresh the page, and we'll see that we have an icon here, and inside, there's also an icon. And in general, friends, the menu in MoonShine can have as many levels as you want. Let's copy this group and make this solution. Okay, let's go back. Refresh the page, and we'll see group, inside another group, inside a bunch of groups. So, the menu can have as many levels as you want. If you use a top menu instead of a sidebar menu, everything works the same. Next, friends, what else is interesting in the menu? You can look at the quick method called badge. This way, let's say, you can indicate how many items are in a section. You make a menu link to the comments section and immediately indicate, for example, that there are 3 comments there. Go back, refresh the page, and you'll see that under documentation, in this case, not comments, there's a badge with the count. This can be an int or a string, it's up to you. Let's go back, I had an extra group. And let's go back to the documentation so we don't miss anything. We'll see what else is interesting. Besides menu group and menu item, there are also dividers, which can be useful if you need to separate several menu items, groups, or items within groups. For this, use menu divider. Like this, make, and by default, it will just be a line, like this, separating our menu. But it also has options, as you can see, label. If you specify a label, let's say links. Go back, and the divider will look different, not just a line, but with a name. Okay, let's move to the documentation. We've figured out the divider. We've figured out the icon, but we're not diving too deep into icons yet, as we see there's a section we'll focus on later. I'll show you the full power of icons in MoonShine, although some hints are already present in the menu documentation. We also see that icons can be set at the resource and page level through attributes. But since we haven't touched on that topic yet, we'll skip it for now and return to it later. We've covered the badge. As for the translation section, as you can see, you don't need to specify a function for translation, just specify the key, then translatable, and MoonShine will automatically translate. The same goes if this is the last level in the localization array. You can specify a prefix, where exactly it's located, also with dot notation, and the translation will happen. But actually, the layout performs the render just before rendering the page or resource. So, here, all providers are resolved, routing is present, localization is present. And you can just specify it the same way as in Laravel, using the helper, and then whatever you need here, even without callbacks, and everything will work. The same goes for fillers. Right here, you can specify a route, and accordingly, the route name you need for this menu item. Okay, friends, let's go back. I can tell you a little backstory about why translatable is still present in the package, even though the layout performs the render when everything is already present. This is, let's say, a legacy from version 2, when we had to declare the menu directly in the provider. Back then, there were no routes yet, they weren't implemented, there was no translation, and you had to use these sugar methods or work through callbacks. The same goes for fillers, and that's where this originates. But these methods weren't removed because if you're a package developer and want to integrate something into the menu at the package level, you'll still need callbacks and similar sugar methods. So, for now, this remains in the package. Okay, friends, let's move on. We've already looked at opening in a new tab using blank. This can also be done not through a method but through a parameter in the constructor, via the make method. It's up to you what's more convenient. We also see that almost all methods have a callback with a check where you can verify whether the blank method will be added or not. If you specify false, despite it being present, the link will still open in the current tab. The next interesting method is canSee. This is a display condition. Let's say you have a menu, like we have here, and you don't want to clutter the top with if statements for different roles, showing a specific set of menu items, groups, and so on. You just want to hide a specific menu item for a certain user session. You use the canSee method. And then, in the callback, let's say, specify auth, ID, or a role that's not equal to 1. Go back to the admin panel. And after that, you'll see that the menu item is gone. Since I'm an admin with ID 1, I don't see the item. If we do the opposite, only ID 1 sees the menu item, then it will be returned to the group with the items. That's the method you can use, both at the menu item level and at the menu group level. But no one's stopping you from using conditions. If something is displayed, such and such menu, you can create specific factories, menus, and so on. It all depends on your goals and experience. And we'll move on. Another interesting method is whenActive. By default, our menu items become active when we're in a specific section. That is, when our actual URL matches the menu item's URL without get parameters. But if, let's say, you create some custom page inside, here, it has a completely different URL. It doesn't match the search pattern, but you still need to make this menu section active. then you can use the whenActive method. And in the callback, specify that it's active even if the page URL is such and such. I think the example is clear enough, and in general, it's clear why it's used. Okay, and now we're moving on to attributes. Before we talk about attributes, let's take a look at how menu items generally look. We see an element with the tag, a simple link. All links in MoonShine that you see, this button, filters, these buttons here, are implemented using the actionButton component. This is a powerful component that we'll talk about later. And very soon, we'll learn that everything in MoonShine is components, tables, hidden blocks here, possibly flexes, grids, sidebars, sugar methods, breadcrumbs, and so on. All these components render HTML tags or sets of tags, as in the case of actionButton, the tag responsible for the link. And we can control its attributes, class, adding other HTML attributes, whatever we need. And we can do this at the menu level too. For example, here we have a menu item, we add custom attributes, and let's add some data attribute, data, hello world. Like this. Let's go back, refresh the page, open our documentation, inspect it, and we'll see that the attribute has been added. Only in this case, I've slightly misled you, the attribute isn't added to the tag but to the list item, specifically to the menu item. And here we see it. To add it to the tag, MoonShine also has a way. But for that, let's go back to the documentation. This is the next point. As we see, what we just did is attributes. More detailed information about attributes is in a separate section, component attributes. Be sure to check it out. We'll look at it later. But right in the example, we see that it's done exactly as we did. Only there are also sugar methods, class and style, which allow you to quickly specify a specific class or set of classes and, accordingly, styles. But here's the next interesting point. MoonShine is so flexible and powerful, even at the menu item level, even at the MenuManager level, that you can not only add attributes to a button, you can completely replace it using changeButton. We can take an example directly from the documentation. Copy it, go back. Let's remove custom attributes here and do changeButton. Here, we're getting acquainted with actionButton for the first time. Let's import it, remove the comma, this isn't the case. And what's happening here? We're changing the button for the menu item, it's there by default. And we're adding the class newItem attribute to this default button. Let's see what comes out of this. Let's go back. Let's inspect and see that our button, here it is, has the MenuInner class, the link class that was there by default, and newItem, which we added. And here, besides attributes, you can use the full power of action buttons in MoonShine. Let's say, open something in a modal. Okay, go back. And now, when you click, the documentation doesn't open, a modal window opens. As I said, buttons in MoonShine, actionButton, are powerful functionality. For now, we won't focus on them at the menu level, but during our journey, diving into the world of MoonShine, we'll definitely get to know them. And we'll go back to the documentation so we don't miss anything. Let's look at the next menu item, it's the last one. I think this will be a rare feature for you, but in general, know that this possibility exists. Besides changing the button, you can completely replace the view of this element or group. Just specify a custom view and the path to your blade file, which will contain all the logic. And this way, if the power of MenuManager and action buttons isn't enough, you can simply replace the view, and this entire area, either a group or an item, will be on your side. You'll receive all the same parameters and props and implement this item or group your way. Yes, the power of MoonShine can sometimes be intimidating. When we get to components, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So, friends, the lesson on MenuManager has taken place. Congratulations. In the next lesson, we'll still be working on the appearance. Be patient to become professional Moonshiners. I'll accompany you on this journey. From you, as always, I expect likes and comments. Join our chat, where we discuss MoonShine and help each other. See you in the next video on the MoonShine Video Guides channel.